Good morning, folks. It's been, it's been a week since I last checked in with you. Last Tuesday, I was looking for the sites for two photos on a place called La Fortaleza. And I brought you along and I posted the video to YouTube. And today, I'm going to do something different. I mentioned my brother in the video who has come with me on several of these trips to Oaxaca. And my brother watched the video and he said, "Hey Scott, you probably need to fill people in on what you're actually doing and what the whole point is." And he's right. So today I'm gonna not bring you out into a landscape with me. I'm gonna bring you into my MacBook Air laptop computer and use a story map that I made recently to familiarize you with what my project is and why I get old photographs and try to find where the old photographer stood to take his photos. So we're going to leave the porch of my apartment, go inside, and see how that works. As I told you, it's been a week since I last visited with you. I guess today is the 5th of July, cloudy day in Oaxaca. Yesterday I spent a lot of time with a former student, Elibeth Alcantar, who is she's now a PhD student in geography at the University of Texas. And yesterday I had the pleasure of visiting with her and her family in a Mixtec settlement, about an hour and a half northwest of here, where she's trying to come up with ideas on what her dissertation project will cover. And that was a blast. Yeah, I've been busy since I last saw you. On Thursday, it was a wild goose chase, a whole lot of hiking in an area similar. Actually, it was the exact same place, La Fortaleza, but that was the wrong place. I've been to a graduation party, which was fun. Yeah, been walking around town. Tomorrow, I'm heading out to another location. Hope I can get on top of a church and take some pictures. But today, what I want to do is accomplish 6 things. Maybe 7. First, at the end of today's video, which I hope won't be too long, what this long-term project is that I've allowed you to come along with me on. And before we jump in, I need to thank some people. And in the thanking, it might help you understand how this project has developed. The first person I'll thank is the geographer who got me interested in geography and who got me interested in Latin America. And that's William Davidson, Professor William Davidson, who was my professor at Louisiana State University. And wow, his career is characterized by a commitment to being in Latin America, specifically Central America, more specifically Honduras, and doing field-based and archived-based cultural historical research, where he was looking at changes in cultural landscapes through time, changes in human cultural patterns through time. In Honduras, in over 40 years, he basically made that country his second homeland. But he is largely to thank or blame for the perspective that I bring to the practice of geography. Um, as I said, it's a historical geography that's looking for change, how landscapes have changed from the past to the present is one. That's one aspect I focus on. And let's see, more than 15 years ago, I collaborated with not a geographer but a photographer who I came to find out that he had some interest, still does have interest similar to mine. He's interested in a type of photography called repeat photography or rephotography. And Byron Wolf and I were on faculty at Chico State at the same time. And in 2004, we began collaborating on a rephotography project, um, whereby Byron did the rephotography. I helped him find the locations where we needed to be, wrote some essays about landscape change that I observed, and the result was a book. And this website is something that Byron created as part of a promotion for the book. Byron was interested in how this particular photographer named Edward Muybridge, how he worked as a photographer in Central America in 1875. And for me, Muybridge's photographs were a record of earlier landscapes and an opportunity to practice historical geography and a study of landscape change. Where on the left, you've got Edward Muybridge's picture of, they call it a patio for drying coffee. And he took it in 1875 when the coffee industry in Guatemala was in its early stages. Byron and I had the pleasure of visiting that particular coffee farm, and Byron took the picture on the right so that we could look at what some of the changes had been. And I wrote an essay about the ornamentation of the agricultural landscape, where on the left you see a fairly, partly it's because it's a black and white picture, but you see a fairly spare landscape that was dominated by function. Everything in the picture could be connected to the production of coffee. In contrast, the photograph that Byron took on the right shows an ornamented landscape. It still functions as a coffee producer. It's been enhanced by the introduction of ornamental plants. Up on that bank is an eco lodge for visitors who come and want to do some coffee and bird watching tourism. So, same landscape, two different periods in time, and two different uses. And I enjoy looking at how these landscapes change by using photographs and investigating what brought about the changes in those two different landscapes. That's my second expression of gratitude. My third one is to my good friend Nick Zentner. For a decade, Nick, he's a good geographer, but he's a geologist at Central Washington University, where I used to work. And for a decade, Nick has expanded his masterful teaching in the classroom to masterful teaching in the field and sharing through YouTube. And for a decade, Nick has encouraged me to give it a shot. That involved I had to get a phone, which only happened a year or so ago. And also it involved being committed to, let's kind of putting yourself out there, and at the same time, telling stories about places in the hopes that there might be some viewers who are interested in the place and how you tell the story. So, it was just a couple months ago where I said, yep, Nick, I'm going to give it a shot. He gave me some pointers. I haven't taken all of them or mastered all of them. But I do have to thank him because he really has provided a model of basically sharing one's knowledge beyond the classroom, beyond the university, through the means of YouTube, an iPhone, and a gimbal. So thanks, Professor Davidson. Thank you, Byron Wolf. Thank you, Nicholas Zentner. So, see, I've achieved one thing now. That took a long time. Let's see if we can get faster. Okay, what I'm doing here in Oaxaca as I hike, bus, hitchhike with old photographs and retake the photographs is I'm doing some cultural historical geography. Specifically, I am looking at landscape change, not that one, landscape change in the Mexican state of Oaxaca. And let's go to YouTube, not YouTube, let's go to Google Earth, where I can orient you. Ooh, a lot of place marks. That basically means unfinished work on my part. All right, so there's the U.S. I don't want to spend too much time getting the orientation right. All those place marks are in Oaxaca. Oaxaca is not so far from Mexico City as a crow flies, but it is a 7-hour bus ride because it's a mountainous landscape between Mexico City and Oaxaca. So I've been working in this state for, jeepers, it's been a while. Specifically doing rephotography to see how landscapes in Oaxaca have changed. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's an example of cultural historical geography that I learned at LSU, Louisiana State University. Professor Davidson didn't do so much rephotography, but he did instill in us that landscapes were teeming with information, and considering how they changed through time was a valid exercise for a geographer. So I've been doing that in Oaxaca, and what I have here is an Esri product. Esri is the leading producer of, what should we say? Geographic information systems, computer cartography platforms. I know very little about any of that, but I did become excited several years ago when I learned that they had made a platform for people who just wanted a way to tell stories with maps and photographs. And I'm still learning, which is a good thing. I'm still learning the program, which is called Story Map. And today I'm going to use, I guess it's one of the first story maps I made for Oaxaca, to give you some idea of this project. So Oaxaca, 1950 to 1960, change and persistence, using repeat photography to learn a landscape. This photograph was taken in 1951. I know exactly where the photographer stood. I know that that colonial aqueduct on the left is still there. I know that the building on the right with the three windows with the bars in front of them, it's still there. I also know that this has become one of the most popular walking thoroughfares in a popular tourist destination in Mexico, which is Oaxaca City. I learned about this past landscape by learning about um, an accomplished native of Oaxaca. His name was Juan Ignacio Bustamante Vasconcelos. And I've been working with his photographs for the past several years. And I just really feel fortunate that he was such an accomplished person who also was a shutterbug. Basically, wherever he went, he brought his camera with him and he took pictures. He went lots of places because he was a medical doctor in Oaxaca who would travel throughout the state to help the government decide where to establish clinics. And he also had a unquenchable. He was very curious. He was curious about colonial churches. He was curious about the various indigenous groups that populate Oaxaca. As I mentioned earlier, there's more than 16 different languages spoken currently by the natives of Oaxaca. Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos also was interested in archaeology, so he took lots of pictures of archaeological sites before they'd even been restored. He also served as an elected representative, a diputado, and during that period in the 70s when he was serving his district, he would take pictures of the different infrastructure projects that the government was providing. Things like roads, dams, rural electrification. So I've been pretty lucky that I found the collection of his photographs. Here's just an example. And they're all housed in the Fundación Cultural Bustamante Vasconcelos, which is in downtown Oaxaca, in the historic center. And it is a family library that's open to the public. And Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos' daughters, they run this well-organized library. And I've become friends with them. I was with them at the graduation party on Friday night. And yeah, they just helped me use the collection and work on this repeat photography project. One thing I left out about Professor the doctor is that he was an avid hiker. And so one reason that I've been climbing around hills and mountains in Oaxaca is because that's what Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos did. And he took panoramic shots, which capture lots of the rural landscape, some cases urban landscapes. And so that's why I like getting up there to take a picture so I can compare and see what's changed. As I said, I've been doing this for several years. Oh, here's an example of taking pictures of rural electrification. Where's the zoom going to work? Yeah, nice. So, my brother Sean and I, it took a couple trips to find that particular location, but I'll show you what I did with this one maybe later in this installment. Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos, as I said, mentioned, He also took pictures of rural electrification. So he was interested in these government projects to see that they actually were serving his constituents. Uh, he, he, he was a military doctor, and he also ran a private practice in Honduras. And part of the military training at the time in the 50s and 60s were there were track meets, and so there's a large collection of photos from track meets that Bustamante Vasconcelos took. There's a story map that I've decided. I was on a bus yesterday and I thought, I got an idea. I'm going to do a story map called From the Roof, because part of this project has involved traveling to locations like this one, which is in a mountain community called Islan de Juarez, and asking for permission to climb up to the church roof so I could recreate the photograph. And that's something that Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos did a lot, which I've done a lot. I'm going to be doing it tomorrow. And it makes for some, interesting pictures, interesting ways to look at a large amount of landscape in a panoramic photograph. So I basically have been looking at climbing lots of peaks of hills and mountains to take panoramas, or climbing to the top of churches to another kind of peak to take panoramas. As I'll show you later on, there's also some street side pictures that he took, and so I had to take. So I've been doing this several years, and Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos' daughters and we decided, hey, we should do some photo shows of my work, which, it was kind of new. Basically, producing a photographic exhibit is different from creating a journal article for publication. And I've put a lot of work into that for the last several years, which involves creating flyers that I put up all around town, inviting people to the opening. So here's one from 2017. In some cases, I embed the picture so they get some idea of the past and the present and how they fit together. In some cases, I create sort of a mashup where I take portions of the old picture, just portions, and embed them in the new picture. So we mix landscapes from the past and the present. So that's become part of my project, which I didn't intend initially, and it does take a lot of time. Creating photographs, large format, on foam board to be displayed in the Fundación, which is a beautiful colonial home, was a colonial home, which has an interior courtyard and a gallery of a covered gallery that surrounds the courtyard. Maybe later this week I'll do a short installment and show you the Fundación. It's a wonderful place to show what I've been doing, and show my photographs, and show Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos' photographs, which a lot of Oaxacans don't even know about the archives of photos, which they have access to. It's just a matter of asking when the Fundación is open. I really enjoy the shows, although they do take a lot of work. But, I have to lead off the opening night with a short, they call it a discurso. That's not my favorite thing. Where basically I have to give a speech, which I don't want to do. But I do a brief one that is heavy on expressions of gratitude and light on what they will see in the photographs. Instead, I walk after the discurso, the opening speech. Uh, I walk among the crowd as they're looking at the photographs that we've hung for them to observe, look at. And that is quite enjoyable, where I'm talking to Oaxacans about their landscapes and landscapes that they know very well, or in some cases, they've never been to. And so then it becomes a conversation with the inhabitants of the landscape. Let's scroll down a little bit farther to show you why I like the Story Map platform. It's like Story Map because it allows me to connect maps with images. So here you see a collection of place marks that demonstrate every place where I've taken a picture in Oaxaca. There's a lot of them. And if we scroll farther down, you can see a collection of repeat photographs where I focused on Oaxaca City. And in some cases, I do a pretty good job of finding where he stood and retaking the photograph. And I love when that happens because then I get to make photo sliders where you can see the 1951 landscape and then you can see the 2017 landscape and observe how urbanization has spread up the hillside towards the most important archaeological site in Oaxaca, Monte Alban. How urbanization is filling in the floodplain of the Rio Atoyac, an area that still floods. Of course, it is built in a floodplain. So this is a combination of panoramic view and, as I mentioned, street level view. Professor Bustamante Vasconcelos was a historic preservationist, and captions that he wrote for his photographs often encouraged Oaxacans to protect their colonial architectural heritage. And so he took these pictures, well, once again, 1951, and then I returned, and yeah, I got that one pretty good. And so I see, yeah, this colonial landscape building that's been preserved. Of course, it was kind of hard to find the right location when there's so much traffic zipping by. I finally gave up on taking a picture when there were no cars in the foreground. Oh, here's another one. As I said, Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos, he was a man of many interests. Architecture was one of them. And not just buildings, but the wrought iron work that hasn't completely disappeared from the preserved colonial landscape. This caption right here might be his strongest condemnation of changes to Oaxaca's colonial urban landscape. Contra Oaxaca, demolición de esquina de Allende, Porfirio Diaz. He's basically expressing this demolishing colonial buildings is against the interest of Oaxaca. And so that demolition happened in 1960. I'm curious if he knew what was going to be built. Maybe he wrote the caption after he saw what resulted from the demolition. And I think he might be encouraged, though, that since his death in 2001, there are many examples of colonial landscapes here we are once again at that aqueduct landscape, which, as I mentioned, has become so popular. Just arches for some reason, just they attract people. Also, when it's not a major automobile thoroughfare. And so here you see the aqueduct and the fountain. I missed it a little bit, but it's pretty good. Yeah, that building's been restored and it has a function, so it's not empty. It's a place where artisans from surrounding villages have a location to sell their wares to visitors. And Oaxaca is a popular tourist destination. Here's another way that Story Map allows me to connect locations to images. And this particular story map was focused on change and persistence in the urban landscape of Oaxaca City. And so all the pictures are photographic pairs from Oaxaca City. So if I click on an icon on the map, it's supposed to bring up an image. And so here's the image. It's where one of the public fountains has been removed, but the two buildings that bracketed it in the past, well, they're still there and quite colorful. And then I can just back out of it and back out of it again. Oops, backed out too far. But I can back out of it again and get back to the map and place marks that connect to photo pairs. The work that I was doing on Tuesday that I brought you along for was another story map that I'm working on. It's called Escalando en los Valles Centrales de Oaxaca, 1951 hasta 1971. You'll notice it's in Spanish. That's because whenever I make a story map, I do an English language version, but I also do a Spanish language version because I want my story maps to be accessible to the folks who live in those landscapes that I've been recording. So how can we do this? Let's see. I don't know. I guess we could start with the map. And oops, wrong one. The map I'm using here it's not a map really. It's a aerial photo. No, I think it's satellite imagery from Google Earth. But I do want to orient you. We're in the state of Oaxaca, and on last Tuesday I talked about the central valleys of Oaxaca. And the central valleys of Oaxaca they contain all of those blue place marks. They're shown in sort of that tan color. And that's collection of highland valleys that are between 4,000 and 5,000 feet above sea level. I'm sitting in one right now. It's nice and cool. And as a young man, in his 30s, Dr. Bustamante Vasconcelos, it seemed like he hiked just about every peak that surrounded these valleys, or every peak within these valleys, so that he could, he just created this wonderful panoramic record of the central valleys or valles centrales of Oaxaca. And on Tuesday, I brought you to the eastern edge of the valley, and we'll zoom in a little bit, move the map over a little bit. So I talked about busing 25 miles in 45 minutes to San Pablo via de Mitla. And yeah, let's zoom in on Mitla. It's an important archaeological site. I took some pictures there on Thursday. Not real good. But on Tuesday, it worked pretty well. So I walked through this western extension of town with rocks. On the way back, I had rocks in my hands, but waiting for dogs because my long experience of walking with Dr. Davidson is scariest dogs are on the edge of town. But I took the long route up to this little hill. It didn't seem like a hill when I was hiking to it because I needed to get to La Fortaleza. And I love this imagery because this imagery shows these sort of squiggly lines, and these sort of squiggly lines are rock walls that were part of the fort, which is the source of the name or the origin of the name La Fortaleza. And I was up there because Professor Bustamante Vasconcelos was up there taking pictures. And so I did too. And let's make it big. You're not gonna let me. Oh, I'm still in. Yeah, I'm not in publish mode. Okay. You know what I can do? I can take you down to slider mode. I hope. Alright. Oh, yeah. This will work. I did a pretty good job with these photos. So, there's the original photo, taken 1959. And those ruins, those are all basically the remnants of adobe block buildings that were guarded by rock walls that are below. And so I found them. I found where he stood. I found where these isotes, if you're in Honduras, these isotes are. And I went back and, yep, the isotes are still there. The ruins have, well, they've gotten smaller. So here you can see the ruin as it is today. And boy, I wish I would have been there in the afternoon, but I got lots to do. I can't always just wait for the right light. Here's part of the wall. It was bigger there, and there's that corner. So I was pretty pleased with that. I had, golly, within 2 hours of returning on Tuesday, I already put these up. And I was like, okay, this is going to work. There was 2 photographs, and here's the second one. This one was a little more difficult to take. It was easy to find. Here's that same corner of the adobe structure, right here on the left edge of the photograph. Here's the Mitla Valley. Here's basically where I walked. Here's where the cross is. It's the route I should have taken. I should have come straight up the gut. Here's those stone walls that I showed you earlier in satellite imagery. And here's what I got to do. Got to get close to it because, I want to get the right location. I don't think a cactus got me that particular shot. And you notice this cactus over here. It's healthy, but it's blocking, not all of it, but it's blocking most of that corner of the clay ruin, the adobe ruin. And it's blocking, much of the valley, which I was looking to see. But I can still work with it. So, that's a nutshell of my project. I'm creating a record of 2 slices of time in the landscapes of Oaxaca by using historical photographs, old photographs taken by Professor Juan Ignacio Bustamante, Dr. Juan Ignacio Bustamante Vasconcelos, finding the exact locations, whatever the travails involved in getting there, and trying to frame my photograph exact to what he did so that I can nail that ridge line so that that one came out pretty well. Well, on the edge, got a little problem there. We won't talk about that. Did pretty good. Yeah. And it's not just photographs. There's a journal called Focus on Geography, and they're getting ready to publish a recent story map where I write some interpretation, description, explanation of changes in the cultural landscape that I observed by taking these photographs. Now, I think I'm going to stop, and maybe tomorrow I can take you up on the roof of the church at Tamazulapam del Progreso. I hope you've enjoyed this. See you later.